Alex Thompson had never believed in myths. He was a rational man, practical, grounded in facts, and driven by reason. But when he moved into his new apartment, a sprawling old building in the heart of the city, things started to shift in ways that were hard to explain. The apartment was cheap, with creaking floorboards and walls lined with ancient wallpaper that seemed to whisper whenever the wind blew. The neighbors were quiet, almost too quiet, and there was an odd feeling in the air, a tension that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up at times, but Alex shrugged it off. People overhyped old buildings all the time. It all began one rainy evening when Alex, in a rare moment of curiosity, stumbled upon an old book in the attic. It was tucked away in a forgotten corner, its leather cover cracked with age and its pages yellowed. The book didn't have a title on the spine, but the illustrations on the inside were unmistakable. Mythical beasts, gods, and creatures of ancient Greece. But this was no ordinary mythology book. As Alex flipped through the pages, he began to realize that these weren't just stories of gods and monsters. There was something darker lurking within the text, something more insidious than any fairy tale. The book spoke of a secret society, an ancient order that had been pulling the strings of human history for centuries, the Reptilian Order. The order, according to the book, believed that humanity had once been under the control of a race of reptilian beings, creatures from another world who had shaped the myths of Greek monsters like Cerberus, Medusa, and the Minotaur. These creatures weren't just legends, they were real, and they had been locked away for millennia, waiting for the right time to resurface. Alex thought it was all nonsense, a twisted blend of conspiracy theories and ancient superstition, but something about the book gnawed at him. The more he read, the more the lines between myth and reality blurred. It was as though the book was pulling him deeper into a web of secrets that had been hidden from humanity for generations. He couldn't put it down. That night, as Alex sat in his dimly lit living room, his mind racing with the bizarre information from the book, he heard something strange, a soft knock on his door. He hesitated for a moment. Who could be visiting him at this hour? With a sigh, he stood up and opened the door. Standing in front of him was a man, pale with a sharp, almost unnerving gaze. His eyes glowed faintly, and his skin had an odd, almost reptilian texture, as though he was wearing a disguise that didn't quite fit. "I know what you're looking for," the man said, his voice smooth but carrying an unsettling edge. "You've found the book, haven't you? The one with the truth about the Reptilian Order." Alex's heart skipped a beat. He felt a cold sweat break out across his forehead. How could this man know about the book? He hadn't told anyone, not even his closest friends. Before he could react, the man stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his presence filling the room with a strange, almost suffocating weight. "You've uncovered something dangerous," the man continued, his eyes gleaming unnaturally in the dim light. "The Reptilian Order isn't just a myth. It's real, and it's more powerful than you could ever imagine. They've been watching us for centuries, controlling events from the shadows, manipulating the very course of history." Alex felt a chill crawl up his spine. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The man's lips curled into a thin smile. "The time has come. Cerberus, the three-headed guardian of the underworld, isn't just a story. He's real, and he's guarding something far more dangerous than you can comprehend. You've awakened something, Alex, and now you have a choice. You can help us, or you can become part of the myth yourself." The words hung in the air, thick with an impending sense of doom. As the man turned to leave, he paused at the door and glanced back at Alex. "Remember, the monsters you thought were only in myths, they're very real, and they're not the only things lurking beneath the surface." The door slammed shut behind him, and Alex was left standing alone in the darkness, his mind reeling with the terrifying implications of what he had just heard. The following days were a blur for Alex. After the visit from the strange man, everything around him seemed to grow darker, heavier. He tried to shake off the conversation, dismissing it as a strange, unsettling encounter. But the words haunted him. The monsters are real. They're not just in myths. How could something like that even make sense? Despite his attempts to go about his life as normal, Alex couldn't ignore the growing unease that gripped him. At night, the shadows in his apartment seemed to stretch unnaturally, and the whispers that had once felt like a figment of his imagination were becoming clearer. Soft murmurs, faintly audible, echoed through the walls. He kept hearing the sound of footsteps outside his door, slow, deliberate, as if someone was watching him. On the third night, as the clock struck midnight, Alex found himself drawn back to the book. It lay on his desk, its pages open to the section detailing the reptilian order. He had skimmed through it, but there was something about the ancient symbols that he hadn't fully understood. As he studied the text more closely, a strange sensation washed over him, as though the book was alive. The next page was unlike any he'd seen before. Its letters were written in a language he didn't recognize, yet they seemed oddly familiar. There was a strange connection between the symbols and the feeling he got when he looked at the man's eyes, cold, distant, but undeniably reptilian. His breath caught in his throat as he traced one of the symbols with his finger. Suddenly, the air in the room grew colder. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. Alex's heart raced, but he couldn't pull himself away from the page. And then, as if pulled by an unseen force, he heard a loud crack. The floor beneath him shifted, groaning like an old wooden ship in the storm. The walls seemed to pulse with an eerie energy. He stumbled back, knocking over his chair, and the world around him began to warp, the edges of his vision darkening. For a brief moment, Alex thought he was losing his mind. But when the darkness receded, a figure stood in front of him, tall, cloaked in shadows. The figure's face was obscured, but Alex could make out the outline of a single glowing eye staring back at him. "You've opened the door, Alex," the figure said, its voice deep and echoing like a low growl. "You've awakened the truth." Alex wanted to scream, but the words wouldn't come. His body felt frozen in place. The figure stepped closer, and for the first time, Alex noticed the faint hiss of air, as though something was moving behind the figure's cloak. "It's time for you to understand the real danger," the figure continued. "What you've uncovered isn't just the story of a few forgotten gods and monsters. It's a map, one that leads to something buried deep beneath the earth, something that has been waiting for centuries." Alex's mind was racing. He tried to speak, but all that came out was a choked whisper. "What? What do you want from me?" The figure's glowing eye flared. "I want you to see the truth. The truth about the reptilian order, about the creatures that walk among us, and about the darkness that lives in the depths of the earth. They've controlled humanity for millennia, and their time is coming again. The monsters you read about are their creations. Cerberus, the Minotaur, the Gorgons. They were designed to keep us in line, to hide the truth." The figure's voice dropped to a whisper, its tone more menacing now. "But there are others, Alex, worse than the ones you've read about, and they're coming for you." Before Alex could respond, the figure turned and began to fade into the shadows. But as it disappeared, Alex noticed something. On the back of the figure's cloak there was a symbol, one that matched the one he'd traced in the book earlier. It was a symbol he had seen in the ancient texts, but it hadn't registered until now. It was the same symbol that appeared on the eyes of the strange man who had visited him. The figure was gone, leaving Alex alone in his apartment once again. His mind raced with the terrifying realization. The reptilian order had been watching him. The creatures from Greek mythology weren't just tales. They were part of something far darker, something that controlled humanity's fate. Alex stumbled back to his desk, his hands shaking as he tried to steady himself. The book lay open in front of him, its pages now filled with new symbols, and his fear grew as he realized the truth. The door had already been opened. Alex hadn't slept in 2 nights. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw it. The glowing eye, the hiss of unseen serpents, the echoing words, "The door has already been opened." The book had become a curse. Its pages seemed to rearrange themselves each time he glanced at it, symbols shifting like living creatures. Even the air in his apartment had changed. He could swear it now smelled faintly of earth, of damp stone, like some forgotten cavern deep underground. On the third night, just as the clock struck 3 a.m., Alex heard something impossible. The sound wasn't coming from outside but from below his floorboards. A rhythmic thudding, almost like footsteps, echoing from far beneath him. His heart thudded in his chest. He pressed his ear to the floor, straining to hear. The noise grew louder, a dragging, heavy sound followed by a deep growl, too low for any human throat. Something was moving beneath the building. Grabbing a flashlight and the cursed book, Alex descended into the basement, a place he had never dared visit. The stairs were steep and slick, coated with dust, and the deeper he went, the more he felt like he was leaving the world he knew. The basement smelled even stronger of damp stone and earth. The walls were lined with crumbling bricks, but on the far end, hidden behind old crates, Alex noticed something strange, a slab of rock, smooth and carved with the same ancient symbols from the book. His hands trembled as he brushed the dust away. It wasn't a wall at all. It was a door. As soon as his fingers touched the carvings, the slab shifted, sliding open with a grinding sound. A wave of stale, cold air swept out, carrying with it a faint hissing like dozens of snakes whispering at once. Alex froze, his flashlight flickering. Against every instinct telling him to run, he stepped through. The tunnel beyond was carved from solid stone lined with the same symbols as the book. It sloped downward in a spiral, like some vast underground labyrinth. His footsteps echoed eerily as he descended, the hissing growing louder, blending with something else now, distant roars, low and guttural, like beasts stirring in their sleep. Alex's flashlight beam caught movement on the walls. Paintings, frescoes, impossibly old, showing creatures he recognized from mythology. Cerberus with his 3 snarling heads, the Cyclops towering over men, Medusa's serpents writhing as she turned warriors to stone. But the murals showed something more disturbing. Behind the monsters were tall reptilian figures cloaked in shadows, their slit pupil eyes gleaming as they manipulated the creatures like puppets. The implication was clear. These monsters hadn't been born from myth, they had been engineered. Deeper still, Alex came to a massive chamber where the tunnel ended. It was circular, its ceiling lost in darkness, its floor marked with an intricate mosaic. At its center stood a statue, a monstrous hybrid of man and reptile holding a staff topped with a 3-headed dog. Around its base were offerings, coins, bones, and something that looked horribly fresh. Alex's breath quickened. He took a step closer, shining his light over the statue's face. The eyes weren't stone, they were glass or something worse. They reflected his beam unnaturally, almost alive. For an instant he thought he saw them blink. Then the ground trembled. A low growl rumbled through the chamber, deep and resonant. From somewhere in the darkness, chains clinked heavy and wet. The hissing grew louder, joined now by a sound Alex recognized instinctively. A low, guttural bark, but multiplied, echoing from 3 throats at once. Cerberus. Alex staggered back, his flashlight shaking wildly. From the far end of the chamber, between 2 massive pillars, a shape emerged, huge, hulking, its claws scraping against stone. 3 heads rose from its shoulders, each with glowing red eyes, each bearing rows of jagged teeth. The creature's breath steamed in the cold air, carrying the stench of rot. It was real. Behind it, in the flickering shadows, Alex saw them, the figures from the murals. Tall cloaked, their eyes shining like molten gold, scales glinting beneath their robes. The reptilian order wasn't just a legend. They were here in the flesh, guardians of this nightmare. "Welcome, Alex," one of them hissed, its voice layered in human. "You found what was meant to stay hidden. The myths were only masks. What stands before you is the truth of your world." Alex stumbled backward, but there was nowhere to go. The door behind him had sealed shut. The chamber trembled again, the 3-headed beast snarling as it padded closer, its claws sparking against the stone. And then, as the creatures closed in, Alex realized with a sinking dread, the labyrinth wasn't just a place. It was a prison, and he had just walked inside it. The chamber vibrated like a living thing. Dust drifted from the unseen ceiling as Cerberus prowled forward, claws gouging grooves into the ancient floor. Alex's flashlight flickered, its beam sweeping wildly across the walls. The 3 heads moved in unison, each exhaling a different stench. Scorched earth, decayed flesh, and a strange metallic tang like blood and iron. The beast's eyes fixed on him with a hungry intelligence, and the sound of chains grew louder, as though Cerberus had been unbound for the first time in centuries. Behind the creature, the cloaked figures fanned out in a semicircle, their movements synchronized, almost ritualistic. Their hoods shifted just enough for Alex to glimpse the truth beneath, scaly skin glimmering like oil, slit pupil eyes glowing in the dark, and thin, forked tongues flicking out with each hissed breath. They were not human at all. The reptilian order wasn't a metaphor. It was a race, ancient, hidden, and powerful. "Do not fear the guardian," one of them spoke, its voice a deep rasp that echoed unnaturally off the chamber walls. "Fear the gate it keeps." Alex pressed his back against the sealed stone door. His mind raced. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but there was nowhere to go. The mosaic beneath his feet seemed to hum faintly now, vibrating like a heartbeat. The patterns of the tiles weren't decorative, they were symbols from the book, and Alex realized with a sickening clarity that he was standing in the center of a ritual circle. "What do you want from me?" He whispered, though his voice was swallowed by the cavernous space. The reptilian nearest to him stepped forward, lowering its hood fully. Its face was a grotesque fusion of human and lizard, long snout, needle teeth glinting in the dim light. "You have opened the door because you are a key," it hissed. "Your bloodline carries the mark. You are descended from those who once bargained with us." Alex blinked, stunned. "Might the bloodline?" Another figure spoke, its voice softer but no less inhuman. "Your ancestors were not mere mortals. They were caretakers of the gate, keepers of the labyrinth. When the gods of Olympus warred with us, they sealed our kind beneath the earth. But the seal weakens with each passing age. You, Alex Thompson, are the last of the blood that can open it fully." The room tilted as the words sank in. Alex's hands trembled uncontrollably. He thought of his family, ordinary people, or so he had believed. Could this nightmare truly be his inheritance? Cerberus growled, the sound so deep it rattled his bones. One of its heads snapped at the air, teeth clashing like iron traps. The reptilian leader raised its staff, a black rod tipped with a shard of some shimmering green stone, and the beast immediately stilled, sitting back on its haunches like a dog awaiting command. "You were not meant to find the book so soon," the leader hissed, "but fate has chosen. You will complete the rite. You will open the labyrinth fully, and our dominion will return to the surface world." Alex's heart pounded in his ears. "And if I refuse?" A low hiss of amusement rippled through the circle. "Refuse?" the leader said. "You have already begun. Each page you read, each symbol you traced was a step in the pact. You have called us, and now you will serve us. If you resist..." It gestured toward Cerberus, whose 3 heads snarled in unison, eyes glowing brighter. "The Guardian does not feed often. It would savor your defiance." Alex's knees threatened to give out. His mind clawed for any rational explanation, but there was none. The air smelled of dust and ancient death. The hissing echoed like 1,000 snakes in the dark. They were telling the truth. He was caught in something far older than history, a secret war hidden beneath myths. Another reptilian figure stepped forward, holding a dagger made of obsidian. Its blade was etched with more of the same symbols. "Blood opens the way," it hissed. "Your blood." Alex pressed himself against the wall, panic rising. He had no weapons, no plan, but as his eyes darted around the chamber, something on the mosaic caught his attention. At the edge of the circle, where the tiles formed the image of a 3-headed dog, there was a single tile cracked in half. Beneath the crack, faint light glimmered, blue, not the sickly green of the reptilian staff. A memory surfaced from the book, one of the few lines he'd translated clearly. "Where the Guardian stands, a second path waits." The reptilians drew closer, chanting now in their guttural tongue. The dagger glinted as it rose, ready to cut his palm. Cerberus leaned forward, its 3 heads sniffing at the air, drool sizzling as it hit the stone floor, and Alex made a decision. With a sudden burst of movement, he dove toward the cracked tile, slamming the heel of his hand against it. The stone gave way, shattering under his weight. The floor beneath him collapsed, and a rush of freezing air roared upward like the breath of the underworld itself. He fell. For an instant, he saw their faces above him, reptilian, furious, their glowing eyes peering down as Cerberus lunged but missed, its claws scraping sparks against the stone. And then he was plunging into darkness, away from the chamber, the beast, and the Order's chanting voices. But as he fell, he realized something worse. He hadn't escaped the labyrinth, he was falling deeper into it. Alex crashed hard onto something cold and wet, his flashlight clattering away into the dark. The impact knocked the breath from his lungs, leaving him gasping as the echo of his fall rolled off into the unseen distance. He lay there for a moment, disoriented, the smell of damp stone and something far older filling his nostrils. When he finally moved, his palms slid over slick rock. No, not just rock. Scales. He recoiled violently, rolling to his knees. In the dim, flickering beam of his fallen flashlight, he caught sight of the surface he'd landed on. It was a massive slab of stone carved like a serpent's back, the grooves forming spirals and coils that seemed to shift when he blinked. The slab wasn't dead rock at all. It was part of something alive. The chamber around him was vast, cathedral-like, but not built by human hands. Colossal columns rose out of the ground like fangs, their surfaces etched with spirals and runes that glowed faintly green. The air pulsed with a low hum like the heartbeat of a buried titan. Water dripped from above, vanishing into dark cracks below. Alex crawled toward the flashlight and snatched it up, his hands trembling. Its beam illuminated a narrow path snaking between pits of black water. Each pit reflected strange shapes, glimpses of things moving just below the surface, shadows coiling and uncoiling like serpents. He heard them breathing. Far ahead, at the edge of the light, an archway rose from the ground. It was carved with the same symbols as the book, but larger, deeper, as if gouged into the stone by claws. The archway wasn't just a door. It was a maw, a massive serpent's mouth frozen in stone, fangs jutting down, its throat descending into blackness. A whisper slithered through the chamber. Alex spun around, the beam of his light cutting through the dark. No one was there, yet he felt the presence. Something watching from beyond the pits, its gaze heavy and cold. And then a voice, not from the air, but inside his head. "You have come where few mortals dare," it hissed. "You walk the arteries of the earth. You walk where the gods buried us." Alex staggered back. "Who are you?" The voice chuckled, a sound like stones grinding together. "Names mean nothing in the dark. But you know my kind. We were the source of your myths, the architects of your fears. When your Olympian gods rose, they feared us and cast us down. Yet we remained. We bred the guardians you call monsters. They are not beasts, but tools." The pit stirred. Shapes broke the surface, heads, horns, wings, claws, glimpses of nightmares from ancient tales. Alex's stomach turned as he realized the truth. These weren't statues or remnants. These were living things half asleep in the black water. He saw the one-eyed glare of a cyclops rise briefly, then vanish with a ripple. A serpent-haired silhouette swam past, her glowing eyes burning in the dark. The monsters hadn't died. They'd been caged. "You're of the blood," the voice said again, softer now as if closer. "Your line kept the gate closed, but your kind grew weak. They forgot their purpose. You have opened the way as was written." Alex's throat tightened. "I'm not doing anything for you. I'm getting out of here," the voice hissed, amused. "Out? There is no out. The labyrinth does not end. It grows, it remembers. You cannot flee what is beneath your skin." At those words, Alex felt something under his sleeve, a burning, crawling sensation along his arm. He ripped his shirt back and stared. The skin of his forearm was mottled with faint, scale-like markings, almost invisible but shimmering faintly in the light. They hadn't been there before. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no," the voice sharpened, echoing now through the chamber itself. "The pact is already sealed. You are not merely a key. You are a vessel." The pits churned violently. A deep rumble rolled through the ground as the archway, the great stone maw, began to tremble. Dust rained down. The carved fangs cracked, revealing fresh stone beneath as the black throat beyond yawned open wider. Glowing faintly with green fire, something enormous moved in the depths, the sound of scales sliding over stone like an avalanche. Alex backed away, his flashlight beam shaking. Behind him another sound rose, the echo of claws scraping stone. He spun and saw a familiar silhouette emerging from the tunnel above. Cerberus, descending like a nightmare given flesh, its three heads snarling, drool hissing on the stone. And behind the beast came the reptilian figures, their robes billowing, eyes blazing with triumph. "The vessel has reached the maw," one of them hissed, their voice high with excitement. "The old one stirs." The ground split beneath Alex's feet. He clung to the edge of the serpent slab, his flashlight tumbling into the black water below. The pits erupted as monstrous heads broke the surface, roaring, shrieking, their forms obscured by steam rising from the depths. Alex's only thought was survival. He pulled himself to his feet and bolted toward the far side of the chamber. The reptilians gave chase, their inhuman limbs moving with terrifying speed. Cerberus leapt over a pit, its claws gouging deep furrows where Alex had stood seconds before. He dove through a narrow side passage just as the great archway shuddered again, a deafening roar rising from its throat. The sound wasn't just loud, and it was felt, vibrating in his bones, shaking his teeth. making his vision blur. Something vast was waking. As Alex stumbled through the narrow tunnel, he heard the voice once more, this time deeper, layered, as if 1,000 serpents spoke in unison. "Run if you must, child of the gate. You flee not from us, but from yourself." And then the tunnel ahead opened into blackness, a drop he couldn't see the bottom of. The tunnel narrowed, the walls pressing in like a throat swallowing him whole. Alex's palms scraped along slick stone as he stumbled forward, every breath tasting of iron and dust. Behind him, the roars and hisses of the chamber faded, but not the feeling of pursuit. It was as if the walls themselves were aware of him, closing in, urging him onward to something inevitable. He reached the edge of the drop he'd glimpsed before, a chasm carved into the earth like a wound. Its depth was unknowable, a darkness so complete it seemed to swallow his flashlight beam whole. And yet far below something glowed faintly green like the heart of a dying star. Alex stared down, trembling. There was no way back. He could hear the reptilians moving in the tunnel behind him, their claws clicking against stone, their hissing voices echoing in some ritual tongue. Cerberus's growls rolled like thunder, closer now. With no choice, Alex climbed down. The rock face was jagged and damp, slick with some strange resinous slime. The further he descended, the more the air changed, warmer now, humming faintly as though alive. He risked a glance upward. In the faint light above, shadows leaned over the edge of the chasm, the cloaked reptilians, watching. He reached the bottom at last, landing on a floor of black stone so smooth it reflected the faint green light like water. The glow came from the center of the cavern, a vast pool of liquid emerald swirling slowly, its surface rippling as though stirred by some invisible breath. The ceiling above vanished into darkness, but he could sense something there, a presence so massive it bent the space around him. The hum grew louder, not a sound but a vibration in his bones, and then he saw them, shapes carved into the walls. Not symbols this time, but reliefs. Titanic serpents entwining humans, winged creatures feeding on kneeling figures, and a colossal being with a head like a dragon's skull and a body like a god's, its arms outstretched over the earth. The figures on the wall weren't myths. They were history. The pool bubbled. Alex stepped back instinctively, his foot splashing into shallow water near the edge. The green glow brightened, casting shifting patterns across the walls. Something stirred in the depths, too large to be seen fully, but its movement displaced the liquid like a rising leviathan. The hum became a voice, not echoing but inside his skull. "You have come to the heart," it hissed, a sound older than language. "You are the last. You carry the key we left in your blood." Alex's hands clenched into fists. "I don't want any part of this," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm not your key. I'm not your vessel." The liquid surged upward, forming shapes, tendrils of emerald light curling into a towering column. It coalesced into a face, reptilian yet divine, eyes like twin suns burning green fire. The scale of it dwarfed everything. Alex felt like an insect staring at a god. "We were here before your myths," the voice said. "We are the architects of your fears. Your Olympians chained us using your ancestors as locks. But locks weaken, blood thins, the gate cracks, and now through you we rise again." Images flashed in Alex's mind, searing and vivid, his ancestors kneeling before this same entity. The building of the Labyrinth, the forging of Cerberus, the birth of Medusa not as a cursed woman but as a weapon, the reptilian race standing behind it all, shaping history like sculptors shaping clay. He saw human kings crowned by clawed hands, wars orchestrated from below, entire civilizations used as experiments. Alex dropped to his knees, clutching his skull. "Stop it!" he screamed. "Stop showing me this." The entity's voice grew softer, almost intimate. "You were never apart from us, Alex. You are ours. The mark awakens in your flesh even now." He looked down at his arms. The faint shimmer from before had spread, patches of pale scale-like ridges now running up his forearms, glowing faintly green. His veins pulsed with the same light as the pool. "No," his voice was a rasp. "I'm human! You are both," the entity hissed. The bridge between worlds. "Through you, the labyrinth opens. Through you, our reign begins anew." Above, the sound of claws and hissing grew louder as the reptilians descended into the cavern. Cerberus's growls rolled through the darkness like a storm approaching. They were coming to complete the ritual. Alex staggered to his feet, backing away from the pool. "I won't do it," he said. "I won't be your bridge." The entity's vast face loomed closer, its eyes narrowing, twin suns eclipsing. "You already are," it whispered. The pool erupted, a column of emerald liquid shooting upward. The vibration shook the cavern so violently that chunks of stone rained from the ceiling. The reptilians reached the floor, their eyes gleaming with zeal as they formed a circle around Alex. The leader raised the black staff high, its green shard blazing like a beacon. "Behold the vessel," it hissed. "The labyrinth opens." The ground split at Alex's feet. The glow engulfed him, tendrils of liquid fire curling up his body like serpents. The voice filled him, not in his ears but inside his blood, and then, for the briefest instant, he felt it. Power, ancient and coiled, unspooling inside him like something waking from a long sleep. He was no longer sure where Alex ended and the entity began. The light, no longer just green but a blinding, all-consuming fire, surged through Alex's veins. It felt like the earth itself had taken root in his bones, a force beyond time and space, primal and ancient. The serpent's voice echoed in his skull, louder now, a chorus of 1,000 whispers. "You are becoming one with us, Alex. One with the labyrinth. You feel it, don't you? The hunger. The power." He staggered, clutching his head as the glow intensified. The reptilians closed in, their chanting rising in a rhythmic, hypnotic hum. Cerberus circled him, its 3 heads snapping at the air in unison, the eyes of the beasts glowing with anticipation. Alex's heart hammered in his chest. His blood pulsed with power, but it felt wrong. The hunger was gnawing at him. It was the same hunger that drove the creatures around him, the hunger to consume, to control. The entity, the voice, was inside him now, filling his every thought, every inch of his being. The world around him blurred into chaos. The cavern trembled beneath his feet, the ceiling cracking, the walls shifting like the tendrils of a vast living organism. The labyrinth was waking. The reptilian leader raised its staff again, its voice echoing across the cavern. "The vessel is complete. Now the labyrinth will claim the surface. The monsters shall walk among men once more." Alex's vision darkened. He could feel the entity's will inside him, urging him to act, to release the power, to bring the world into the grip of the reptilian order. The serpent's voice was so sweet now, whispering promises of unimaginable power, of being a god, of commanding creatures that were once confined to the myths. "Join us," the voice coiled around his thoughts. "You are our chosen one. You belong to the labyrinth. Let go and become eternal." The power inside him was almost overwhelming. He could feel it in his bones, flowing in his bloodstream like molten fire, threatening to consume him completely. His body wanted to give in, to give up. The entity's presence was so vast, so powerful that it felt as though it was trying to erase who he was, to make him one with the darkness. He could feel the ancient creatures, the monsters, awakening in their prisons. The Minotaur, the Gorgons, the Cyclops, all waiting for the moment when the gates would open and the world would fall. And then a thought, a spark. Alex squeezed his eyes shut, summoning the last bit of his will. His mind flashed back to everything he had seen in the labyrinth. His ancestors, the bloodline, the creatures in the depths, and the one thing he knew for sure. He was not just a vessel. He wasn't just a pawn in their game. He had the power, but he didn't have to obey it. "No," Alex whispered, barely able to hear his own voice over the cacophony of the labyrinth. "I won't become you." He fought the urge to bow before the power, to submit. His hands clenched into fists, his nails digging into his palms. The entity screamed in his mind, furious at his defiance, but Alex held firm. He focused on the broken slab beneath his feet, the cracks in the stone, the fissures where the labyrinth's power leaked into the world. The cracks in the ancient serpent's maw, where the walls had shifted. He wasn't just a vessel. He was a breaker. In that instant, he made his choice. "Enough," Alex shouted. His voice, though weak, rang out like a war cry. He pushed against the tide of darkness. The green light that had been suffocating him burst outward like a shockwave, a burst of energy that sent the reptilians reeling backward. Their faces twisted in fury and confusion, but it was too late. The connection was severed, the bond broken. The labyrinth shook violently, its very foundations cracking. The emerald light faded into darkness. The creatures in the pit screamed, thrashing, their forms writhing in agony. Cerberus, howling in pain, turned and fled, its massive body disappearing into the depths from which it came. Alex fell to his knees, gasping for breath as the power drained from him. But his body felt different now. It was as if he had purged the poison, but at a great cost. The scales that had begun to form on his skin faded, leaving only the faintest remnants of the mark. The voice that had once whispered in his mind was now silent. For the first time since he'd fallen into the labyrinth, Alex felt in control again. He was still human, and that was more than enough. He looked up at the reptilian leader, whose eyes glowed with rage. "You don't control me," Alex said, his voice steady now. "I will never be part of your order," the leader hissed, baring its teeth. "You may have defied us, mortal, but you cannot escape the labyrinth. It will always find a way." Alex took a step forward, ignoring the pain in his body. "No, the labyrinth has already been defeated." With one final surge of will, Alex reached into the darkness around him, his hands finding the very heart of the labyrinth. The walls began to crumble, the floor splitting apart. The sound of the world breaking echoed in his ears as the reptilian order and all its horrors collapsed into the chasm below, swallowed by the very depths they had tried to control. The chamber was silent now, save for the echoes of his breath. The labyrinth was falling apart, but something stirred in the darkness, a distant, cold voice promising that the story was far from over. The labyrinth may have crumbled, but its legacy, its horrors would never truly vanish. Alex's heart sank. He was free, but the war had only just begun. Alex didn't know how long he sat there, the shattered remnants of the labyrinth collapsing around him. The cavern had fallen into an eerie silence, save for the distant rumblings and echoes of the walls crumbling away. His breath came in ragged gasps, his body shaking from the strain of what he had just done. He had severed the connection, torn himself free from the labyrinth's influence, but he could feel it. Deep in his bones, something had changed. The light of the emerald pool flickered one last time, then extinguished, leaving only the cold, empty darkness. The vast serpent's maw above had sealed shut, the portal now nothing more than a jagged opening in the stone. The ancient reptilian markings had faded, their power dissipating into the air like smoke, and yet Alex could still hear their whispers, faint, lingering at the edges of his mind. It wasn't over. The labyrinth was gone, but the scars it left on the world, and on him, would never fade. He forced himself to stand, the weight of what he had done settling over him like a shroud. His body felt strange, like a part of him was no longer entirely his own. The remnants of the mark still lingered on his skin, faint like burn scars from a fire that never truly went out. The reptilian order may have been defeated for now, but something darker, deeper had awakened within him. His first instinct was to run, to escape, to leave this cursed place and never look back. But he knew he couldn't. The real battle was just beginning. As he made his way back toward the exit, the ground beneath him rumbled again. Not a tremor from the collapsing labyrinth, but something far more intentional. The walls shifted and a deep growl rumbled from the darkness ahead. Alex froze, his heart pounding in his chest. It wasn't Cerberus this time. No, something worse was coming. He sprinted toward the exit, his legs weak beneath him, but the sound of claws scraping the stone grew closer. The pit in his stomach deepened as he heard a voice, familiar and chilling. Alex. It wasn't the voice of the serpent, but it was something worse. It was his voice. He turned and found himself face to face with a figure emerging from the shadows. A version of himself, but twisted. His skin was pale and slick with a faint green sheen, his eyes glowing with the same eerie, molten light he had seen in the labyrinth. This version of himself smiled, the expression empty, hollow. "I am what you could have become," the figure whispered, its voice a perfect mirror of his own, but colder, more insidious. "You think you broke free, but you didn't. You're still part of it, Alex. You always will be." Alex stepped back, his heart racing. "No," he said, his voice shaking. "You're not me." The twisted version of himself laughed, a sound like stone scraping against metal. "Oh, but I am. I am everything that the labyrinth wanted you to be. The power, the hunger, the thirst for control. It's in your blood now. You can never be rid of it." Alex gripped the edge of the broken column beside him, his knuckles white. "I chose to fight back. I chose to be human." The figure's smile faded, replaced by something colder, more calculating. "You think you can escape it?" That you can simply walk away from what you've done? It stepped closer, its eyes narrowing. The labyrinth never really lets go. It changes you. And now you're the key, the gateway between this world and theirs. You can never outrun it. It's part of you. The world around him seemed to darken, the air thickening with an unseen pressure. The twisted version of Alex raised a hand, and Alex felt a sudden, overwhelming pull at his chest. It was as if something was trying to claw its way out, something ancient and dark that he had freed by breaking the labyrinth's chains. You may have fought the order, the twisted figure continued, but there are others who seek to use your bloodline, to awaken the rest of the creatures, the ones who are not confined to this world, the ones who exist in the cracks between worlds. You may have shut the gates for now, but the cracks are widening. Alex staggered back, his breath coming in quick, shallow bursts. What do you mean? He gasped. The figure raised its hand, and the shadows around them twisted, coiling like serpents. There are things that the gods themselves feared. Things that the reptilian order only whispered about in their darkest rituals. You've awakened a doorway, Alex, and you're going to help them open it. No, Alex hissed, clutching his head as the pressure in his skull intensified. I won't. I'll destroy whatever's left. I'll destroy everything you've built. But the figure only smiled, its grin stretching unnaturally wide. You can try. But remember, Alex, you are the gateway now. You opened it, and there's no going back. With a final, mocking laugh, the twisted version of Alex dissolved into shadow, leaving nothing but the crushing silence of the cavern. The walls creaked as if the labyrinth itself was breathing again, waking from its slumber. Alex sank to his knees, his hands shaking. He could feel it now deep in his gut, the truth of what he had done. He had broken the chains, yes, but in doing so, he had let something else into the world. And there was no erasing it. The labyrinth had been only the beginning. The night air hit Alex like a slap, cold, sharp, and so startlingly fresh after the heavy, humming air of the labyrinth that for a moment he almost cried. He crawled up the broken stone steps of the old church ruins where the tunnel had begun and collapsed on the grass, gasping, staring at the sky. But the stars didn't look the same. They seemed too bright, too close, shimmering like the scales of some enormous creature curled across the heavens. Constellations shifted subtly when he tried to focus on them, rearranging into strange shapes. A coiled serpent swallowing a labyrinth, a three-headed beast snapping its jaws, an eye without a lid. His breath caught in his throat. The world above wasn't right anymore. He staggered to his feet, brushing dirt from his torn shirt. The ruins were empty, silent, but the silence felt wrong. The wind whispered not through leaves, but in syllables he couldn't quite understand. His phone buzzed weakly in his pocket. No signal, not even the time display. As he stumbled out onto the cracked road leading back to the nearest town, he felt eyes on him. Not the hidden subterranean eyes of the labyrinth. These were above ground. Human-shaped shadows moving behind windows, glinting in car mirrors, flicking out of sight whenever he turned. He passed a gas station, its lights flickering. Inside, the attendant stood frozen behind the counter, staring at him with unblinking, glassy eyes. For a second, Alex thought he saw scales ripple under the man's skin. Then the attendant blinked and looked normal again, but his smile was too wide, too still. Alex pushed on, heart hammering. The town was asleep, but the deeper he went, the more wrong everything felt. Posters hung in windows bearing symbols he recognized from the labyrinth's walls. A church bell rang at 3 a.m., though there was no church nearby. The stray dogs that had once haunted the alleys now sat perfectly still in the shadows, their eyes glinting faintly green. When he reached his apartment building, relief flickered for a moment. He climbed the stairs 2 at a time, locked the door behind him, and collapsed against it. He was home. He was safe. Then he saw the mark on his wall. It hadn't been there before. A spiral of black ink, like a labyrinth drawn by a trembling hand. His stomach turned as he realized it wasn't drawn at all. It was growing, the lines pulsing faintly like veins. He touched it with trembling fingers and pulled back as a jolt of green light snapped across his skin. His phone buzzed again. This time a message appeared. Unknown. We know what you did. The labyrinth lives. Alex's throat went dry. He deleted the message. It reappeared instantly. Another followed, unknown. We are everywhere. We are waking. A soft hiss came from behind him. He spun around. Standing in his kitchen doorway was a figure he recognized instantly. The twisted version of himself, the one from the cavern, but here in his apartment. Its eyes glowed brighter now, its grin impossibly wide. It wasn't a hallucination. It had crossed over. "You can't go back to normal, Alex," it whispered. "You opened the cracks. The order is already here. They're in your streets. They're in your neighbors. They're in your sky." Alex's heart raced. "I'll stop you," he said, his voice shaking. "I'll stop all of you." The thing that looked like him tilted its head, mock sympathetic. "Stop us? You're becoming us. Every time you fight, you get stronger, and every time you get stronger, you get closer to me." It stepped forward, and Alex stumbled back until his shoulders hit the wall. But before it could move again, the building trembled. A low, guttural roar echoed from somewhere outside. Not human, not any animal he knew. The windows rattled. Something massive was moving in the street below. The thing grinned wider. "The first creature has already awakened," it said softly. "The Minotaur walks again. And soon the others will follow." Alex darted for the window. Below, in the dim glow of the streetlights, a shadow lumbered between the parked cars. Enormous, hunched, horned. Its steps cracked the asphalt. People on the sidewalks didn't run. They stood perfectly still, staring, their eyes glowing faintly green. The world above wasn't the world anymore. He turned back, but the twisted version of himself was gone, dissolved into the labyrinthine mark on the wall. His phone buzzed one last time. Unknown. It's not a conspiracy anymore, it's a kingdom. Alex's hand shook as he typed a single reply. "Not if I burn it first." The mark pulsed, almost like it was laughing. The Minotaur moved like a wound through the city, an impossible shape rendered real and terrible. It tore through the quiet streets with the confidence of something that belonged to a different scale of physics. Hooves that punched craters in asphalt, a bulk that bent streetlights like blades, a horn that split air into screams. It didn't run. It made a path. Tires shredded. Glass blossomed into glittering rain, and the scent of blood and ozone stitched itself into the night. Most people simply stood and watched, mesmerized or stilled by the glow behind their eyes, puppets with threads of cold green light running through them. A few screamed and fled, tiny frantic flares of resistance that vanished under the weight of the beast and the hypnotic calm pooling from the shadows. Alex moved like a hunted animal, because he was one. He'd stared down at the street from his apartment window, watched the Minotaur's silhouette crush a sedan, and then lift its head toward the sky as if listening to something only it could hear. His palms were raw from pressing at the windowsill, knuckles white. He could feel the mark in his skin like a second heartbeat, an ember that flared whenever the labyrinth's influence whispered. The cracked labyrinth spiral on his wall throbbed, mapping his pulse. He could hear the city folding into its chorus of hisses, a low hum in the wires, a susurrus in the gutters, a static whisper in the alleys. They were converging, guided outward by the same old will that had stirred under the earth. He had no weapons. The book was gone, left behind in the labyrinth or swallowed by something worse, so he had only the scattered myths burned into his memory and the residual knowledge lodged in his blood. That knowledge was a cold thing, a sense of geometry, of how symbols leaned into one another, of how to make a circle hold and a sigil break. It was less an instruction manual and more a map of possibility. In the center of that map, Natalie, were his own veins. Alex moved down the stairs and into the street before he knew he had chosen to. The city smelled of rain and hot metal. Sirens tried to flare, but the green-eyed crowds ignored them. He kept his head low, shadowing himself with the larger shapes that still obeyed the city's old biddings: delivery trucks, sleeping cars, an overturned bus that steam hissed from. Every so often a hand brushed his shoulder, a neighbor with glassy eyes muttering something like a prayer in an old language. He recoiled from their touch as if their skin burned. The reptilian order's reach was not limited to ritual chambers anymore. Their seeds were planted in bone and habit and the most ordinary gestures of wakefulness. He reached the corner where the Minotaur had last been seen and found footprints, deep cratered tracks, hoofprints that shone faint green where the creature's blood had punctured the pavement. In the smear, lighter than everything else, was a pattern he knew from the book. A faint, interlaced spiral, the labyrinth symbol inverted. It had been left there deliberately, not as a signature, but as bait. Someone wanted the Minotaur to be noticed. Or someone wanted the city to see what old stories could do when fed anew. Alex's first attempt to fight was instinctual and stupid. He grabbed a discarded pipe from a construction site and wrenched it free, planless as a child with a torch. He swung once, twice. The pipe rang off nothing but air, and a half-formed panic when the Minotaur turned its great head. Its eye, huge storm-glass black, dragged across him, and for a heartbeat the animal's gaze was a physical thing, a pressure that flattened thought. The world slid into a stillness like a bad photograph. Then, mercifully, Alex's neck prickled with a sensation he'd only felt once before in the labyrinth. Rejection. The beast's gaze didn't lock him. It skimmed him. The mark in his skin flared and burned against the pull. He felt immediately and horribly how close the infection had come to taking root. How close he'd been to becoming something else while he fought for his autonomy. He dropped the pipe. If he was to confront this thing, brute force wouldn't suffice. The Minotaur wasn't merely a physical menace. It was a sign. It bent the city's will toward it. You could not beat a sign into submission with a pipe. What he did possess was old geometry in a living body. He recalled the phrase from the book that had lodged deeper than any rational thought. Blood answers blood. The old paths remember. If the monsters were tools of a deeper intelligence, if the reptilian order had engineered them, taught them to obey sigils, then perhaps the reverse was true. A sigil could still be a lever. Blood could still answer. Alex found a doorway into a convenience store. The bake case smashed, the fluorescent lights humming oddly. He wrestled together towels, a shard of mirror, and a ballpoint pen, primitive implements for a ritual he barely understood. He cut the pad of his thumb with purposeful timing, letting drop after drop fall onto the paper napkins. The pain woke a clarity that sharp-thinking marathons never could. He pressed his thumb into the center of a circle he drew with trembling hands, the ink smudging into a spiral that bent inward like a spring. He whispered the syllables the book had given him only as scent. No grammar. No language really, only geometry given sound. Tight vowels that folded back into themselves. Consonants that clicked against teeth like keys. The mark in his skin flared as if recognizing kin. And for an instant warmth, not the alien, hungry warmth the serpent had fed into him, but a human warmth, flowed out from his blood into the inked spiral. It was fragile, ridiculous, like trying to hold a flame in cupped hands, but it was something tangible, a thread of purpose, a human gesture folded into old power. He pressed the mirror shard into the napkin and angled reflected light into the smear. The small ritual, a child's magic compared to the labyrinth, seemed to clap its hands the moment he completed it. Outside, the Minotaur reared, as if struck by a wind it did not recognize. Its steps faltered, the rhythm of its destructive certainty stuttering for a breath. People blinked. A dog finally barked. The green glow that had threaded the crowd dimmed just a fraction where the spiral's light leaked. It was not victory. It was an opening. Alex ran, carrying the napkin close to his chest. He followed the broken trail the Minotaur had left, staying always at the periphery of the creature's attention. Sometimes its head swiveled in a slow, majestic prehistoric arc, and Alex froze and became a tree, a facade, anything that made the beast see through him. Other times it stomped into a plaza and the lights went out as if the world itself averred him. Each time the Minotaur faltered, Alex would slip a few more inches closer, dreaming with clumsy bravery of a final gesture, to bind the beast where it stood, trap its will with a sigil of his own blood, and undo its tether to whatever dark mind guided it. The city became a chessboard of rubble and smoke. He snatched up a shard of terracotta tile and scraped it until there was powder. He mixed the powder into his palm with his sweat, and the smear of ink left on the napkin. The ritual grew sloppier, more desperate. Less geometry, more graft and improvisation. But even half-remembered rites carry weight when the blood backs them. When at last he stood within arm's reach of the Minotaur's flank, the animal was slower, breathing steam. The spiral he'd created glowed faintly in his hand as if it had a life of its own. He pressed his palm into the creature's flank, feeling a hide that was leather and riverstone and the cold of old myth. The Minotaur shook like a struck bell, pain, confusion, recognition. For a terrifying second it bucked, throwing Alex backwards. He hit the ground hard, tasted grit and copper, but his palm was still smeared with the beast's blood where he had pressed into it. And then, the animal's roar dissolved into a whimper. Its steps all at once slowed, each hooffall sounding hesitant. The green light in the crowd flickered and then sputtered out in a wide radius like candles put out by a wind that had shifted direction. People dropped to their knees, blinking back into their normal mortal selves. A woman near the curb covered her mouth and began to cry as if waking from a bad dream. A group of teenagers, eyes rimmed with dust, stared at their hands and laughed, small and astonished. Alex lay on his back and watched the Minotaur's bulging eye close like a curtain. The beast lowered its head, and with a motion that was half mourning, half defeat, it sank to its knees and lay still, great breath shuddering. The city around them exhaled. He had not slain the creature. He had not even chained it. What he had managed was this: to remind it who and what it was, an instrument, not a god. To give it a memory of leash. The labyrinth spell, he realized, worked both ways. The monsters were bound by meaning. When their meaning was twisted, they rampaged. Restore the proper name, the proper binding, and they could be held at bay. Alex sat up slowly, the adrenaline leaving his limbs in a numb, delicious ache. People were moving now, calling to one another, clutching hands and weeping and laughing in the same breath. Answers would come later. Questions would be long in the night. Men with badges and radios would arrive and try to erect explanations. Someone would film the Minotaur and make it 1,000 memes. The reptilian order would not be fooled for long. The ripple of this night would reach farther than he could see. He pressed his palm to his chest and felt the mark under his skin like a pulse. He had used his blood against the beast and it had worked, but at a cost. The act left a taste in his mouth like iron and seaweed, and a faint echo of the creature's breath caught in his lungs. He had touched the thing and it had touched him back. For now the city slept uneasy and the sky looked, if anything, only a little less like scales. He rose, helped a trembling man to his feet, and looked at the spiral napkin in his hand, its edges singed by the friction of his actions. The spiral hummed faintly, and Alex understood with bone-deep clarity that this was not a victory, merely a hinge. He had opened a way to fight, and the world, suddenly, was full of doors. He tucked the napkin into his pocket and walked toward the dim horizon where the sirens would come, where the cameras would gather, and where somewhere, in shadows that smelled like old stone and colder scales, someone or something was listening to the sound of a human heart learning to strike back.